Hi, welcome to the story time. Today's story is going to be Stanley and the Wild Words by Mona Voelkel and the illustrations by Nancy Kincade. There we go. The author got to sign this for me. Oh, look. Looks like he's just at school in a writing contest. I'm winning this writing contest, Stanley thought. He'd worked night and day so everyone could hear his story. Oh no. Doesn't look like he won. Darn, Stanley didn't win. All I ever hear is spelling, spelling, spelling. I'm never writing again. And the note on his paper says, Stanley, great plot. Check for spelling. Stanley crumpled up his story. He kicked the trash can so hard it fell off his bookshelf and hit him on the head. Stanley, he woke up in a forest of wild words. Chaos and rumpus nearly knocked him down. Stanley sidestepped to avoid belligerent, then squeezed between slumbering sloth and question. Curious question. Hi, I'm Pete. What's this about you never writing again? I'm not writing because I can't spell. Well, spelling was hard for me too, Pete said, until I started asking questions about words. Well, I have a question. Why doesn't spelling make sense? Well, let's see, said Pete. What's the wildest word you know? Enormous. Do you know what it means? Asked Pete. Very big. Excellent. Pete put a book on Stanley's lap, and Stanley read the title. Etymology? Pete smiled. In this book, we can find a word's history. The history gives clues about meaning and spelling. Enormous comes from Latin, explained Pete. In Latin, N-O-R-M-A, norma, means rule. The word enormous still carries a sense of rule. Yeah, but enormous doesn't mean rule. See this E, said Pete, the first one? It adds to the idea of out of to our base and norm. Oh, Stanley's face brightened. So something enormous is something outside the rule. My dragon's enormous teeth were bigger than normal. Yes, said Pete as he swung. Now you're getting it. Pete, beamed Stanley, this is an enormous discovery. In those trees, you have a prefix tree and a suffix tree. Pete laughed. It's time to meet the family. Norm family, meet Stanley. Wow, look at all these words. We have normal, enorm, normally, enormity, ginormous, and subnormal. Enormous has so many relatives, exclaimed Stanley. Pete picked up a stick. And now, Stanley, instead of sounding out our word, let's think of how it's built. Let's spell out each part. We have the prefix, the base, and a suffix, and it builds our entire word. Next, we'll connect sounds to letters in the base. How many sounds do you hear and feel when you say norm? Or Oh, 3, said Stanley. Then Stanley spelled out the whole word. E-N-O-R-M-O-U-S. Pete, spelling does make sense. Pete nodded. Questions about words, like stories shared with friends, will lead you to magical places. In a flash, Stanley was back in his room. There on his desk was Pete's hat, pencil, and a book. He put on the hat, took his story out of the trash, and picked out a word to explore. Stanley had stories waiting to be shared. And Pete's note says, Dear Stanley, I hope you continue your quest to understand spelling. Just start with an interesting word. Here are some questions to guide your investigations. Number 1, what does your word mean? Number 2, who are the relatives? 3, how is it built? And 4, how many sounds do you hear and feel? Happy questing, from Pete. P.S. My only request is you share what you've learned with others. And that's the end. That's a very good book. Thanks for joining me. I hope you find some really good words to explore.